I'm 45 years old, and I've been married to Mason for 17 years. I have a son, Ken, who is 20 years old, from a previous relationship with Jake. Right after high school, I moved into Jake's house, but he died of cancer 2 years later. 3 years after that, I met Mason, and we got married a year later. Mason moved into my house, which belonged to my late husband. When my son turned 18, Mason apparently told Ken that he should pay $600 a month for rent and utilities. Ken responded by telling him that, actually, the house belonged to him. And out of spite, he offered Mason to either pay him $10,000 a month or leave. My husband didn't believe him, but I confirmed that it was Ken's house, and we couldn't make him do anything. Rent didn't matter to Ken, because his father left him a fortune that would cover all expenses for life. I really wish Mason had talked to me about this before saying anything, because we have 3 sons together. I work as a high school teacher, and my husband works at a factory, and our combined income is only $70,000. Here, everyone has their own room, a huge yard, and a pool, and we could never afford to buy or rent such a place elsewhere. My husband was in shock and tried to apologize, but my son didn't accept it and insisted that he either pay or leave. The most we could afford is a 2-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. I told Mason that taking our kids away from a good school district and their friends because of his mistake is not an option. A month passed, and my husband didn't pay rent. When my son demanded the money, my husband just laughed and said he wouldn't pay. My son gave him an eviction notice. My husband suggested we go to his parents' place, but I refused and said that either he pays or leaves alone. He paid and has continued to pay since then. However, my husband refuses to talk to Ken, even though everything else in the house is perfect. My late husband also left my son a lake house in Florida. My son finished college and wanted to take all of us on vacation to celebrate before starting law school. My husband was excited, but my son suggested he pay $600, explaining that an adult man shouldn't live off someone else. Mason stormed out in a rage. This morning, as the 5 of us plus Ken's girlfriend were getting ready to leave, Mason yelled at me and couldn't believe I was still going. I told him that I wouldn't let myself and the kids suffer because of his mistake, trying to look tough. I left, and my husband sent me a message saying he was disappointed in me for siding with my son and not him, and for turning the kids against him. Am I the jerk? Top comments before the updates. Wow. Your current husband told his stepson to pay rent for a house that doesn't belong to him without consulting you? Honestly, your husband sounds like a total jerk. He should have immediately apologized, talked to your son, and asked if he could stay. If you divorce him, ask your son to let you stay. My goodness, you're not the jerk. Yeah, I have a feeling Mason was essentially trying to steal $600 a month for his own fun. What a greedy, stupid idiot. You deserve better than this loser. The fact that he didn't tell you means he wouldn't have used the money to pay bills or anything like that. He was probably counting on his stepson understanding that it was a man's thing and not telling you. Everyone here is to blame, except the son and the younger kids. I'm really curious what your older son went through growing up. Your husband knew it wasn't his house, knew he wasn't paying rent, and knew he wasn't your son's father. I don't understand why he thought it was okay to make such demands without consulting his stepson's parent. My guess, he saw an opportunity to make an extra $600. and was hoping you wouldn't find out about it, or would just make you accept it. Mason still hasn't apologized for initially demanding rent money. I was confused and said that Mason told me he had apologized. Ken explained that he never received an apology, and when that happens, Mason can stop paying rent and get his money back. I called my husband and asked why he hadn't apologized to Ken, and he honestly replied that it was because Ken had disrespected him in his own home, and that he should be the head of the house and have authority, but was humiliated when he found out the house belonged to Ken, because then he realized Ken actually controlled him. I asked what his true intentions were when he asked Ken to pay rent. Mason said it was to help reduce expenses. Mason only earns $2,500 a month. $500 goes to bills, another $500 to the kids, and $250 to groceries. He also helps his parents. At the end of the month, he had nothing left for personal expenses, and that $1,000 a month certainly didn't help. He thought about apologizing, but said his ego wouldn't let him do it. Ken said he loves Mason, but doesn't think he'll ever be able to forgive him. I told him that he started this mess himself, and honestly, even if he thought the house belonged to me, it didn't give him the right to charge my son rent. He just hung up. That's where we stand now. I don't know what to do. Second update. When we got home, Mason's parents were there. We, Ken, Mason, and his parents talked. They asked me how I could allow Ken to treat him like that, and that a wife should support her husband. Before I could say anything, Ken stated that a man who marries a mother should treat her children as his own, but he hasn't done that for the past 15 years. I asked Ken what he was talking about. He said that every time I went away for teacher conferences or vacations, Mason left him home alone and took the other boys to fun activities. He always disguised it as boy stuff that I wouldn't like, but said he didn't want to go. When he turned 18, he planned to move out, but then COVID started, and he decided to stay. I asked Mason if this was true, and he looked at me and said yes. He didn't have to care for someone else's child. His parents looked horrified, and his father just got mad at him and said he didn't raise him to be like this. I yelled at him and told him to get the hell out. He begged for forgiveness and admitted that he was wrong in his feelings. His father told him to leave, and when my husband tried to get in their car to go home with them, they flatly refused, saying he was on his own now. He tried to go to his brother's, but when he found out the whole story, he refused too, because he has kids and would be upset if their stepmother treated them so badly. As far as I know, he's now staying with a friend. I sent him divorce papers at his job. He texted me asking to meet. We met at a cafe, and he said he was really sorry, and had been for a long time, and that he never wanted to hurt me or Ken, but admitted that it was hard for him to love someone else's child. I just left him the divorce papers, so it looks like our divorce is about to begin. I apologized to Ken for being a bad mother. He said it's okay, and our eldest son overheard the conversation and now doesn't want anything to do with his father. The two younger ones still spend time with him. Comment: imagine your macho approach getting you kicked out of your home and marriage. What a foolish person. What kind of mother finds out that her husband demanded her son either pay rent or move out, and doesn't throw him out immediately, or at least ask her son if everything was okay before that demand? She completely overlooked that her son had been humiliated for 15 years. Yeah, I'm 110% surprised Ken didn't kick both of them. Mason and his mom, out after what they did, and that they're both living off him. Conclusion: your husband is a complete jerk. He can't love or even treat someone else's child humanely, yet he has no problem financially supporting himself off that child. He's a total and absolute loser. I hope Ken keeps that money for himself. It's hard to believe that you didn't know how he really felt about your son. How could you not know that he wasn't including your son in his plans when you were away? As a mother, I can't believe you suspected nothing. Yeah, it seems like there was some intentional blindness on her part. He was more like a roommate. We had no issues with him, but he would never have dared demand that we pay rent and expect my mother to handle it. In the previous post, it seemed like if it had been her house and not her son's, her son would have ended up paying rent, and she would have allowed it to happen. Glad she filed for divorce. But how long did this go on? And she never realized there was a problem. Did her son never say anything to her, or act in a way that showed her they didn't have a relationship? It doesn't make sense. Next story. I was wrong to tell my husband that he shouldn't be upset when my daughter said her uncle would be the one to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. I'm 46 years old, and I have a daughter, Adele, who is 26. I was in college when I gave birth to Adele. My parents and the parents of my then boyfriend insisted that we get married, so we did. Unfortunately, my husband passed away a week after our daughter's 2nd birthday, due to a heart condition we didn't even know he had. It was a really tough time for me, and I fell into a deep depression. 3 years later, I met my current husband, Alex, also 46, on a blind date set up by a friend. He was a cousin of one of my best friends. We hit it off, and a year later, we got married. Even when we were just dating, he was very attentive to my daughter, and it didn't take long before she started calling him Dad. Even after we got married and had twins, a boy and a girl, 2 years into our marriage, he still acted like a father to Adele. She was even included in my husband's family gatherings and group photos with his cousins, which my in-laws organize every Christmas. Things changed a bit when Adele turned 18. She started calling him by his first name, which surprised both Alex and me. I asked Alex what was going on, but he just shrugged, not knowing the reason. I thought things would go back to normal, but she continued to call him by his name. So I asked her to talk. Alex asked if he could join, to which Adele agreed. Long story short, my daughter overheard my husband talking to a friend about a Father's Day trip to his friend's hostel. The friend asked if he had forgotten to include Adele, since Alex had only requested 3 rooms. My husband replied that the trip was planned for his real kids, and that it wouldn't make sense for Adele to go, since he wasn't her real father. This made Adele feel betrayed and hurt, because she considered him her real dad, even though she knew he was her stepfather. My husband tried to explain to her that while he loves her like a father, his love for the twins was different, because they are his real children. I wanted to make him stop talking because he was using the word real too often. But Adele asked us to leave her room. What made that day even more depressing was that it was her last day with us, before she left for another country to study. Since then, every time she came home, Adele acted as if nothing had happened, but continued to call Alex by his name. Alex didn't want to make things worse, so he just endured it. Now, several years later, my daughter announced her engagement to her longtime boyfriend. We were thrilled for her, since they had been dating since their freshman year of college. 2 weeks before the wedding, we wondered who would walk Adele down the aisle. I thought it would be Alex, as I believed we had moved past that incident. But no, my daughter scoffed when I mentioned that Alex would walk her down the aisle. She said, "I thought it was obvious that Uncle Greg, my late husband's brother, would do it. Besides, I'm not his real daughter, so it wouldn't make sense for him to walk me down the aisle." I didn't argue. Instead, I apologized for my ignorance and told her I would talk to Alex about it, since he also thought he would be the one to walk her down the aisle. When I told him what Adele had said, he got angry, but I politely reminded him about the incident from several years ago, which made him even angrier. He said that was a long time ago, and that Adele should have gotten over it by now. Feeling insulted on behalf of my daughter, I told him he shouldn't be upset since he didn't see her as his real daughter anyway. He broke down in tears and asked me not to speak to him. He still attended Adele's wedding, but looked visibly downhearted. We're still not on good terms, and pretend in front of relatives. My daughter doesn't know about this, and I want to keep it that way, but it's been a week since her wedding, and Alex is still upset. He only talks to me about the twins and household matters, but beyond that, he keeps to himself. I feel terrible, and I think he's acting this way because of me. So, with that said, was I wrong? Comment. She considered him her real father, but he didn't see her as his real daughter. He can't choose when she's his daughter and when she's not. He wants her to treat him like a real father, but he doesn't feel obligated to treat her like his real daughter. The moment he said he thought she'd already gotten over it, he showed that he thinks he can just shatter someone's feelings and expect them to simply forget about it when they find out that Dad doesn't love them as much as his real kids. Honestly, I think Alex just wants to look like the good guy who raised a poor, fatherless girl. He doesn't understand what he did and is playing the victim, as if he's been wronged, when in fact he created this situation by being fake. She really distanced herself from her fake father. He's damn lucky he was even invited to the wedding. She didn't just pull away from him. He told her that their relationship was different from what she thought, and she took it seriously and adjusted her behavior to match what he said about their relationship. She treats him exactly how he treats her. She isn't treating him badly. She just doesn't see him as a father because he said he wasn't. Small update. I want to thank everyone for the advice and comments. My daughter found and commented on my post, and we'll be talking about it tomorrow. She texted me today. I've been feeling tired and couldn't sleep, so I was able to write this. I also want to thank those who pointed out my mistakes. I know I'm not the best mother, but I'm trying. And yes, I was wrong to put up with him. I don't know what will happen at our meeting tomorrow, but I want everyone to have clarity. I also want to add that I don't have a strained relationship with my daughter. She didn't want me to walk her down the aisle, because then Alex would insist on walking her too, since he thought we were a united front. I'll try to update, but it will be difficult, as I know it will be emotional.